Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measure podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning. You're going to realize there's going to be a bit of an interesting intro. Tommy and I and Seth were all just talking just before we started here, and I dropped a really good joke and literally just cut everyone's camera off and just left. And you should have seen Tommy's camera. He was rolling all over his floor because when we go into the intros, Tommy can't see other people in the cameras. So it was quite funny when
you can't do that.
Yeah, that's funny.
I almost didn't make it. I almost just shut off the computer.
Tommy almost canceled himself.
That's funny.
All right. Well, jumping in today, this is a recorded episode for those who are checking in a little bit early. Our main topic today is we're going to take some questions from our mailbag. We've got 3 kind of really good questions here that Tommy's groomed up for us. So we will jump into those questions just in a moment. But before we do that, let's do a couple little, maybe this is a new segment. I don't know. It's been, 320 episodes so far. And maybe we're coming up with a new segment finally. We're finally getting something new. I don't know. Well, we'll see. I think we did joke hour last episode last week. So maybe joke hour will or will not stay. But this one I think might be a real deal. We want to talk about what you're working on. What are some things that you're learning? Are you working on something right now? Are you building something? What have you recently learned? So I've got one. I think, Tommy, you may have another one as well, or maybe Seth's got something. But I was recently asked by, Stephanie Bruno. Stephanie Bruno is from the blog Data Witches, and she was giving me a heads up, say, hey, I don't quite understand what Semantic Link is doing. And when I write a table from Semantic Link into the Lakehouse, I can't read it with the SQL server and the SQL endpoint. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Semantic Link I thought was going to be able to write to Lakehouse. So, yeah, we went through, confirmed Lakehouse is being written into by Semantic Link. Okay, not bad there. We kept going down a rabbit trail. I'm like, okay, something doesn't seem right here. So we literally pulled apart the Delta JSON file and realized that the Semantic Link is using a different version of writing Delta tables than the SQL server can read that layer.
Really?
Yeah, Semantic Link is able to write things using a feature called column mapping. Column mapping inside a Delta table allows you to put spaces in the names of tables. Imagine that. So what they do now is they actually have this new feature in the Delta Lake, and Databricks has had this for a while now. Microsoft is kind of using the spec and catching up here a bit. But the Semantic Link can write this new feature called column mapping. And what we found was when we created a table with column mapping applied to it, when we went over to the SQL server and tried to look at the tables, it said, I can't read this. I don't understand the format. So there's a disconnect between one writer of Delta and one reader of Delta. So I dug this up. I went on the documentation. There's actually like 7 or 8 different engines that can read and write data, and they all have different versions. Reader 1, writer 5, like this. So there's different versions of software that they're using to keep things in synchronized. So we just found apparently a combination of something that writes data in a more advanced way than what another tool can read it as. Anyways, interesting. I don't know how long this will last. I'm guessing Microsoft will eventually fix this, and they're going to just have all the readers updated to read this new column mapping feature. But just FYI, if you're trying to write data, this is probably a very narrow group of people trying to do this one. If you're trying to use Semantic Link to write data into the Lakehouse, and then you're trying to read it with the SQL server, you're not going to be able to do so. So
you're
FYI.
using Semantic Link in notebooks, right?
So this has to be in a notebook. So Semantic Link in a notebook. We create a little data frame, loaded some data, and then literally a very small table, and then wrote that data into the Lakehouse, and it just would not read. And then the error was you had to go into the Semantic Link component and go try and get to the tables. There's no tables appearing, so that all the tables disappeared. And there's a little red icon at the top that's something about like something column mapping. I'm like, column mapping, that sounds vaguely familiar. That's something that Databricks is doing. And so I had then you actually went into the JSON file to actually look at it and like, oh, look, we have a table written using like a pure copy and a copy activity, and then we have one written by Semantic Link. And yes, the definition of those two things were distinctly different. Now, in my mind here, it would be nice if Semantic Link had an option to say, hey, I'm going to write to the Lakehouse, and do I want to use column mapping or not? Would probably be ideal, but there's no option from what I'm aware of. And so the workaround for this one, so if you ever encounter this, the workaround is change your semantic link, your Fabric data frame into a Spark data frame, and you just like use a 2DF or something. Change the data frame type, and then once you translate it, then you can write it just using straight Spark. And then,
You know,
column mapping.
that's interesting because I've had the same problem with either the pandas data frame and needing to change the Spark to, for a lot of times,
Yes.
I was getting a lot of errors trying to push that. So,
Yep.
and that I think what you're seeing is the whole engine and everything that Microsoft's done and just tied up in a nice bow. You basically try to just uncover all the engines and all of the packages, all of the components of what really Synapse and Data Factory are,
Yeah.
and how nicely tied up it is in Fabric.
Yeah. Stay tuned. I believe a blog is going to be coming out from Stephanie about this whole detail thing. And I'm going to even try and push her to help do a little quick YouTube video that we can describe this a little bit more in detail as well. So FYI, that might be coming. Anybody else got any kind of what are you working on projects?
Well, I mean, if this is going to be a series, I guess I can follow up later on an actual solution.
All right. Sure. Yeah.
Lot of frustration right now. With large lakes, it's very difficult. We found it's very difficult to understand where in your lake all your data is stored. Related to, like, I want to know where in my lake I am storing the most data, i.e., where I have the largest costs. Right?
Yes, correct. Because those are the ones you want to cut down.
Yeah, there are Python scripts, there's PowerShell scripts, there's a bunch of things, but they all fall apart when you get to certain sizes in your lake because it just takes forever to run.
Yeah,
correct. So, had a lot of, in quotes, fun over the last week, and ended up having to rip the team and just do it manually, like run statistics on folder statistics on Azure Storage. Found what we were looking for, which was good. But we'll be looking for a better option in the future. And I don't know if that's like enabling some sort of logging to track it as we go.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, it's all non-binary, right? Like, just because we see a file path doesn't mean it's an actual file path.
Yes, exactly. Right.
So
yeah.
A lot of learnings in there this last week.
I've never done that particular situation, but I know the pain of that, like, discovery when you embark on that journey of there's one element here out of all these possible situations that may cause the issue, and just going down that path. I feel for you, man.
Sometimes you'll get to a point. I mean, unless you're around people who already understand how the infrastructure thing works. Like, I didn't know. I'm looking at this question that Stephanie proposed, and I was like, we're trying to figure this thing out. I'm like, what is going on here? If I didn't know, if I wasn't using Databricks, I would not have known where to look for column mappings. I don't think I would have observed that, because that was something that came out, and I was like, I feel like someone was talking about that at Databricks, and then I had to go Google Databricks and column mapping, and this is interesting. Okay, so I think I know what the feature's for, and so it's almost like this is one of the reasons why I think I like data, is because it's kind of like the engineering process. Like, you have a problem, you have to like figure out how to solve it, and you have to devise like, what is my course of action to be able to resolve that problem. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Okay, if I change this one thing, then I can rule out this feature. If I change this one thing, I can rule out this feature. There's a lot of like very sequential like thinking, and like, how can I test different things so that something isn't breaking or not breaking. And that's maybe that's just very common in software, but I used to use that a lot in engineering, which I really liked.
Followed by a lot of grunting, a lot of words like the heck, why, and just yelling randomly as you begin to figure out the problem. So maybe we should call this either terabyte therapy or project pains. I'm trying to think of the segment that we call this.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, normally I love data problems, right? Because there's always something I can think of as far as attacking it. This one, where situations where you have to deliver an answer, right? So there's some sort
tight
of
timelines.
There's a tight time frame.
Yeah.
And you know where the problem is, but there's no solution outside of just like manually trying to go find it.
Yeah.
And that would, like, that to me is the only thing that actually like really raises my blood pressure, because there's no approach to it, right? If you think about a data problem, many times it's like, okay, I can try these 3 things. And then there's work involved in trying the thing, and then you have an explanation of what worked, what didn't work, or it leads you to another answer, another thing to try. And
Mm-hmm.
in this scenario, it was just like, like, I know where I want to be. I know what I need to do. It's like, but I can't run anything that's actually going to return something in a timely manner.
Yeah.
Like, so it was one of those that I did not enjoy.
And I think both your guys' situation bodes well to our previous podcast. I think it was last week.
Like
on
always have
role
consultants.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, I'm just
no
kidding.
sales. No sales.
Yeah.
But it helps.
Go figure
but
that
it
one
helps.
out for
You
me.
don't watch it. You got options. No, honestly, we had the conversation about role shifts and about, you can get all the knowledge now and test things out. But you guys are boding well into the experience side. It's not just about building something that we
True.
do. A lot of times what we do is also, Mike,
This
you're
was
going,
painful. Don't do it
I
this
know
way.
column
Constructive.
mapping. I've heard this before.
Yeah.
And this rabbit hole, Seth, all the experience that you had around the giant lake house of the enterprise data at least gave you some of a starting point, right? Compared to someone who's going in a little more naivete, read the book, but has never gone through it.
I mean, ultimately, we talked about that a little bit, and we could probably spend an entire podcast. But I think there eventually will be a significant problem where, technology or AI involvement in it will simplify workloads to the point that folks won't know how to do that troubleshooting, right? And we've talked about like the skills you learn along the way of building and constructing things, I think will be lost, and that could have detrimental effects. But we'll see.
It's fun. I got a quick one. It's not so much of a problem this time, but really a more interesting one. I'm working with someone on their kind of really building up Power BI and a larger org, and they were asking for, what does milestones look like for, we want to build Power BI champions in-house. That's the kind of the ideal route with some other resources. But they're like, what would the milestones be to get someone who's somewhat of a newbie or someone who's relatively new to Power BI and get them to a Power BI champion? And they're willing to invest resources in the house. So like they're doing a great job in terms of understanding it's a longer term process. There's going to be resources invested, but what would those milestones be? Right. And to get someone to be the Power BI person. Right. And I think that's where they really want to start. And it's been a fun project already. And just to begin to think about it. So I feel like that's right up our guys' alley.
I would agree with that one. I think I've spent a lot of time figuring out what levels of skills you care about for what kind of people.
Right. Well, it's skills, and then there's the experience too, right? Because again, I think they want this person to be able to, in the ideal world, this person is doing the office hours. They're answering all the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the discussions that we had is we can, deliver things and do training, but you have to have person. And something that I'll tell anyone, you have to have person who wants to do this out of hours. I'm not saying it's required, but
it helps. It really helps.
It helps. Yeah. So, and that's been a fun project. It's like, if you were to build in-house, not bring anyone in to build your reports for you.
Yep.
Where do you start? What is that? What does that progress look like?
Yeah.
I
agree. I think those people I think are already identifiable within the business units, right?
Yep.
They're probably the most articulate around data, albeit what you're just going to do as make them a Power BI champion is enable them with more tools for them to do their jobs. And that's the value to the organization and that person.
Yeah.
First milestone, go to finance.
Find them there. Well, finance or some sort of revenue, generation data people, like
they
numbers.
Know numbers, and they know Excel really, really well. And there's a lot of concepts that they're natively trying to figure out and learn. Joining data, VLOOKUPs, index matches, writing macros and VBA. Like, while those aren't, if you like that stuff, you can enjoy that. But I find there's a very low barrier of entry to Fabric once you find someone who's already. And if you're already writing like heavy SQL scripts, if you're already writing VBA to help you in Excel, okay, fine. You're gonna love Python notebooks. It's not gonna be that big of a jump for you. Or you're gonna love writing SQL inside an actual server that doesn't have to have all the SQL bells and whistles. You can just write SQL and get answers out. Like those people, I think, really have an ease of moving into this because there's not a lot of friction, but there's a lot of extra tooling. You can do a lot more things, which I think is really cool.
Yep. This is the part that I really love about, honestly, our conversations. I was initially going to disagree with you. Like, it could come from other areas, but I realized as you're speaking.
Oh, it could.
No, but this is coming from, I think, all of our different experiences. And I think where we started, right? For me, I didn't have anything to do with finance, but I came from marketing, which was Google Analytics, still heavy data.
Totally. Yep.
And I was thinking like, okay, what were those elements that led me into this space? And
correct.
Honestly, part of it was also the love of, I don't want to say the love of software, but yeah, I think there's the tinkering mind of trying.
You're saying you need to look for a nerd.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, like I think what's easy is finance. Finance is probably the universal business unit. That's a good place to start. It depending on the organization or type of industry that they're in, yeah, they could definitely be in other places.
Oh, 100%.
Like people who are engaged in like warehousing, like planning, like to your point, marketing to some degree, if they're really into the metrics of things, sure. Yep. But that's going to be kind of industry specific.
Yeah.
But I would argue though, like, I mean, I love your point there, Seth, and the industry side of things. Yes, there's going to be experts all over the company in different parts, but every company needs a finance person. Everyone does. Like there's always someone, if you're any size, someone's doing the finances. And so typically that's like a common role. And I just find that role consistently has lots of Excel stuff laying around.
Yeah. See, I would argue, and then we'll move on, is I don't even think you need a data person off the bat. I think if you have that person, like for me, if you give me a new software tool or something comes across,
totally disagree with you.
I'm going to devour it, and I'm going to know the keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to know no. Okay,
all right. I'm not going to hire. You can't take you and put them in the business because that's not 99.99% of people.
If I have a wizard in PowerPoint, I'm not sure I'm going to go give them Power BI.
We just talked about this with quick wins, right? What does a quick win have to be? It has to be it has to provide value to both of us. There's value to the organization that these are champions because the organization is like, hey, these people can help other people, and they're like, yeah, but that's not my primary focus or goal or job, right? My primary focus is you're helping me do my job faster, which may free up my time to be more of a Power BI champion. But ultimately, it's a selfish need, and rightfully so, that you're helping them solve their problems faster.
And I do agree. The more straightforward path is the finance and marketing, I think, and easier to identify. You guys are talking about skills, I think, more, and I'm trying to figure out the behavior of this person, which is much harder and something I think that would be a much longer of a journey.
No, I don't agree with that at all because we're not saying every person in finance. We're still saying that person is probably in finance because they're still going to be showing behaviors that set themselves apart from others because they can articulate data. They're talking to you about these things. They're already trying to help others out, right? Those are the behaviors that you would want to lock in and key in and say, that's a potential champion, i.e. somebody that would definitely be interested in skilling up in this area because they're already showing the behaviors that they want to learn or advance their career, or they understand data to a level that other people don't. It's not one or the other.
I got some jokes. You want to hear him?
Yes.
I'm just kidding. I don't have jokes, actually. I was just trying to transition.
I'm going to save that for another topic. Yeah. I do like that, though.
I think it's a good topic, though.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's transition into our main topic. Our main topic is just some mailbag questions. I believe we have a person on our team who can read the mailbag, so we'll kick it over to Mailbag Seth.
Mailbag Seth.
Let's read
Mailbag Seth. Yeah, maybe that's another segment.
That's another segment. Making segments today like crazy. All right, new segment, Mailbag Seth. All right, go ahead and kick our first question over.
Mailbag question number 1. Really enjoy your show. My question is about licensing. I know your latest, we don't know when
one of your podcasts.
One of our podcasts was about licensing. But mine concerns the best type of license to buy if you are a blogger and just want to share links in your blog or on your blog website that allows people to interact with public-facing reports you want to use to showcase your portfolio. I'm assuming for that use case, it's going to be Power BI Pro license that would allow to publish to my workspace in Power BI service, and then I would be able to use publish to web to get the link to use on my website. Just trying to confirm that this is the best approach. Thanks for any feedback you can provide. And a comment telling us when that came in, which was a while ago, but we don't know who from.
Nope.
Okay. Great question.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask if you guys can confirm my suspicion here. I don't think you even need Pro to do this. I think this is a Power BI free user. So you just need to have a Microsoft account. You need to be able to get into Power BI. So first off, desktop's free. Desktop's free. You can go ahead and download that now, which is awesome. And then from there, build your report, connect it to some data, and you can publish to my workspace for free.
If you have a 365.
My workspace.
That's a normal personal account. So you have to identify this is a 365 E5 license.
Yeah, I don't think you can go in. You can't go get. You can't go. No, not E5. This is just an account.
Right. Not personal or
any work account kind of thing. Like it can't be like, something at Outlook.com or Hotmail. I don't think Hotmail or Outlook.com would actually work.
Gmail.com does not work.
Yeah. So you need some. So is there a free way to get a tenant? I think you can get it. I think you can still make a tenant subscription as well. I'd have to double check on that, but I think you can just go create an Azure portal subscription too. Like, so you just need a tenant for something you own. So if you have a blog, Mike's superduperblog.com.
You already have a domain.
You already have a domain, hopefully. So you can attach that right to, go get an Azure subscription or tenant, which would also give you the Microsoft tenant. Use your domain. You can attach that there if you need to. You don't need to do that.
Yep.
But then once you have that, then you should have an email address that you can log into. And then it should just be go to powerbi.com, build your report, publish to my workspace. And I believe once that report's there, you can kick that out and say publish to web, and it goes right from there.
Yep. The only reason you would need a pro license is if you wanted multiple workspaces, and it sounds like it's just the individual efforts and individual things to put on the blog. So yeah, I agree.
Well, and if you're testing too, like I think you find yourself slowly getting and thinking about a PPU premium per user, because if you I would
agree. I was going to go there too.
Yeah. Eventually you're going to go, well, that's cool data flow. Oh, okay. And then you're going to find yourself wanting to do those things. If it's simply reports, I think to your point, but if this is something that a person's really testing more than just reports and visuals out, just get the PPU. Just start.
Yeah, I mean, and especially if it's it's in reference to a blog, right? So the PPU opens the doors for you to do all sorts of testing and additional blog material. If it's independent of that and you're just using some Power BI reports, freebie.
Now,
I can try the Fabric trial.
Well, yes. So I was going to go there too. So there's a couple price points, right? So I think if you're by yourself and you're just playing around the blog, I think I'm either doing the free version and just using the bare minimum of everything that's there. But me personally, I feel like I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to see some of the premium features that I would get. Like if I'm blogging, I'm going to blog about deployment pipelines. So I want to blog about the more advanced features, and that's where it would come with premium per user. So that would be the area I would spend some time there from a blog standpoint. That's just me personally. The trick of this goes, okay, what happens if I want to start consuming Fabric things? And Fabric things are a little bit more tricky because yes, you get a 60-day free trial on Fabric, but once that's done, you got to pay for it. You can't kind of, play that game there. So if you're trying to blog about Fabric, I think it's going to be much more challenging. You're going to be much more metered. Now, you can turn it on. You can then do your demo or play around and then make sure you turn it off when you're done, which would keep your costs down. But I don't think you're going to be spending $10 a month. It's going to be kind of hard to keep Fabric under that threshold, especially if you're doing just some very basic demos and testing of things. So yeah, you're probably going to want to stick with the free license if that gets your need done. Depends on what features you want to blog about. Well, that was a simple question that turned into a very long answer.
Tony, you got more?
I was just thinking about the. We can move on. We can move on because I'm thinking about like what else they're doing, because like from yeah, we can move on.
What do you mean?
So-
I want to keep going.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the other things this person's doing, and like for example, I've been considering or actually working on a mix between AI and BI, trying to think of like what could be some content around there.
Yep.
There's the other cost too that I think you want to think about, and I think Mike, you're probably the best person to talk about this, where you started a domain and a website on WordPress, Squarespace, whatever the one content is.
Small website. You've never heard of it. Power BI tips. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, we got a logo, I think. But I think this is a great example though too of taking even a relatively simple blog, but I love the customization on Power BI tips, and I love the way to be also search for content. It's one thing just to write the content, but I think the way you've categorized and organized content on Power
That's
BI.
all Seth. Seth has been very good about organizing things.
Well, I mean, rely on the German for that. So, but yeah, so
Wait,
no, but
German?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay.
So, but there's a big part here too on, it's one thing just to have the access to the data, but the way you distribute it is, I think the best example to me, no pandering, is really what you guys have done with Power BI tips.
All right, fine, Tommy. We'll keep you around for another month.
All right.
Well, again, I think this blogging question is a good topic actually, and I would, if I had to look back on what I did on blogs, I probably would slightly change what I did. There's a couple things I would have done differently. So I used WordPress as the main blogging site. I also wanted to learn Azure, so I took it as an opportunity to spin up my own WordPress inside Azure, which at the time there was no MySQL database inside Azure, so I had to go buy that from someplace else. The challenge has been is now that I've got a critical mass of things that have been built in WordPress in Azure, and now this database that lives somewhere else, I now have this challenge of like, well, there are now more efficient ways and faster ways to render websites and pages. WordPress is okay, but it's not like the best. And again, we don't get a ton of traffic, but I'm looking at other, like, it would be nice to have done things a little bit differently. So I think I would have liked a little bit more control around it. I'm also thinking like there's a couple things that I'm learning around like static web apps or going to like GitHub pages and building things there where it doesn't cost you anything. And you can write all your pages or code as Markdown, and you can kind of make your blog, just write a Markdown blog. So if I think about when I'm writing content or when I'm actually, a lot of things I do in my company, I write everything as Markdown. So Markdown for me has become very clean and easy to look at. And I love it. It's titles, it's bolded headers, it's paragraphs, it's images, like literally it's everything you need in a blog. I need to be able to put images, headers, and things down. And if you can articulate your ideas into Markdown, you can put that anywhere. Like Confluence takes it, GitHub takes it.
Be a disciple of that.
It's kind of like all over the place. You can kind of use it wherever it's in Azure DevOps. Like once you start learning how to use Markdown, it's very universal to use that lightweight formatting. You can put links in, you can put images in. That's the main stuff I think you care about in a blog. So my thought would be is try and keep your infrastructure as simple as possible and use that, because that way you have more flexibility on the other things you want to do. So that would be my one bit of guidance. I don't like WordPress and their commenting section. Their comments are horrible. I would like to rip it out and instead just drop in like Discuss. I think Discuss is another like third-party application where you can put at the bottom of your blogs, and like it handles the authentication. It handles like weeding out bad comments. It lets you know like this page was linked to this discussion topic, and you can see like all your comments in one single web app. So I really like that feature, especially if you're going to more of like a static web app page, which potentially has better performance. So all this to say is there's lots of different options when you do blogging. I will also say just start. Don't make excuses. Don't feel like my first couple blogs were just utter trash. And Seth very kindly let me know that I was doing such a bad job. He's like, you got to clean this stuff up, dude. You can't just start circling random things with your cursor.
I didn't say that.
I felt like you did.
I was much more tactful.
You were much more tactful. You watch me.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Mike. Do you have anybody doing like reading your blogs?
Blog reviews?
Like blog reviews?
You should probably spell things right.
I'd be more than willing to help you out with that.
Hey, Mike. Have you checked grammar lately? Well, I think that you're talking about
spell much. What's going on here?
On the content too. So one thing we do for our episodes, we have a board or a web app that we look at, like basically all of our episodes that come up. contrary to popular belief, they're not spur of the moment. We think of it. And I think that's a big part too, is to your point, Mike, it's not just, oh, I don't have ideas for content. Whether it's a Trello board, if it's OneNote, just start having a quick place you can write down ideas. Because that's the hardest part usually.
Yeah.
And the last part I'll put on this one, and again, feel free to add more comments, but we can move on if you want. The last thing I will say is, don't feel like you have to have the entire plan figured out to the end. Like, get yourself, like, kind of put a direction of where you're going to go. I think of it a lot like sprinting or agile or scrum, how you ever want to call it. Like, just get enough done. You can always pivot later on. You can always change what's going on. So try and think, at least initially, like, one thing I was very passionate about, I was all in on Power BI. That's going to be what I'm going to learn on. So that's why the website existed by name. And so I try and focus all the content towards Power BI. But that being said, you just had to start. I'm learning something. Someone else may want to learn my thing. I'll start with that. And you just kind of keep doing like little, keep doing it. And so, you can stand back and look back a year and a half, 2 years later and like, wow, I put out 50 blogs. Well, maybe I should go back through and organize them, because now I can start having topics and grouping. And like, that's better when you actually have a lot of stuff to actually group, as opposed to like, well, what are all my groups going to be? What should I talk about? And then you put a lot of this pressure on yourself to say, well, I need to talk about admin and governance, but I don't know much about that, but that's one of my topics. Right. So I got to talk about it, but I'm not really passionate about it. So don't do that. Just start with what you're passionate about, start producing content. And then from there, other things I think will just kind of naturally flow out from that.
Yeah. Yeah. One last comment that always comes to mind, that's not directly related, but sub-related. Every time we talk about published web, is recently I've been perusing Reddit, several different kind of Reddit categories: career, interviewing, Power BI, like those are top ones. And
sure.
And I just want to state, like, and granted, these are communities where people are a lot of times expressing frustrations or looking for advice. It's hard to find jobs right now in many areas. And one of the strongest things you have as a person who understands Power BI is access to a tool that, like we just discussed, with some setup, allows you to create reports and publish them to the web and have a link for free. It is one of the biggest things you can do when you're interviewing or trying to find a job, is differentiate yourself from the get-go. And the best people I've seen in the market, or the ones I want to talk to the most, are the ones that build their resume in Power BI reports. It is a fantastic way to set yourself apart. You already are showing your skill sets in the reports itself.
Love that.
And if you're looking for the thing, right? And I understand there's a lot of automation that screens candidates and all this kind of stuff, and there's a lot of hurdles. It's not going to be the silver bullet. But if there's a link to a Power BI report, I get excited as a hiring manager, right? So publish to web. It's your friend, not just for blogs, but also for, a standing resume or trying to find a Power BI job and busting into there. Well worth kind of exploring that and knowing that path is there to pursue.
It's another really great point. Just know if you are interviewing with Seth and you have your Power BI resume, please make sure by the pixel your layout is.
Oh, it better have a scrim.
I mean,
it better have a line.
Could also be the most detrimental thing you send to.
By the pixel, so your layout and your alignment better be on.
I'm getting more and more convinced that having the ability to, like, inside that interview is like, hey, one, do you have public facing examples of things you built? Because that's very indicative of like what people have done. And I've been in this space long enough to know, like, they copied that. I've seen that one before. Like, I can kind of gauge like what's been copied. But then on the other hand, in interviews, I really like the ability of being saying, look, the expectation is you're gonna have a technical interview, and then you're gonna show up. I'm gonna ask you to share screen. You're gonna get into desktop. I'm gonna ask you to do some basic things. And if you don't,
practice
those, like, man, I'm having trouble recommending.
But a lot of the trouble out there is just getting the interview. And
that's true.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like that is a fast path to get an interview, I think.
I would agree with that.
All right. Next question.
That's fun.
Good question.
I don't think this requires an episode. By the way, there was no name on the previous one. There's no name on this one either. Can you do an episode on your respective routines once you have your data loaded into Power BI? This person met us at one of the user groups. Mike talked through some of his best practices, example, data modeling, managing measures, in addition to talking through the data model and thin report topic.
Ooh, this is a really good one.
Yeah. Do you guys have any respective routines, like right after you load your data?
Well, probably it's go in the corner and cry.
Just hope for the best. And pray.
I suppose it depends on the data set, right?
I mean, I go in because it's like there's so much stuff missing. There's errors all over the place. The data's not what I expected, and everyone said, "Yeah, it's done. It's cleaned. It's clean data." And then I go look at it. I'm like, "Man, we got nulls all over the place. There's this format for date time is all messed up. There's got 3 different formats for date time. What the heck are we doing here?" And then I recuperate myself, and then I actually compose, and then we start actually talking about fixing the problem.
Yeah, pray to your respective person, and then I think for me it's a lot of Tableau editor, but it's a lot of just the base organization. I'm creating my base measures, the sum of, count of, the things that I know that everything's going to be dependent on, and I'm just getting that organization out of the place. I'm also doing the stupid dates, making sure that they're not long format. So because
that's a really good. So let's go.
Organization. I just hate that so much. But
yeah, so I agree with you, Tom, on that 100%. So first thing I'm checking is did desktop or did I accidentally not turn off the auto date time? Because I'm getting rid of that for sure right away day one. Because there's all kinds of weird things in your data, and I don't want those extra date tables hanging around at all if I can help it. I would agree with you, Tommy. I'm also with you. I'm in Tabular Editor, and I'm using scripts to help me do a lot of common things that I think you should be doing in the model already. Like, for example, I'm selecting all the numerical columns.
Yeah.
And in my script, I think I actually have one script that's actually on the GitHub page for Power BI tips. I think we have a whole bunch of Tabular Editor scripts. But there's a script in the Git repo that does create a folder, make a measure, take the column, turn the column from auto summarize to not auto summarize, and then hide it. So I like to do, okay, I know these columns are going to be summed. So I'll run this command. It will do all these, it's like 6, 7, 8 options that are all happening at the same time, making folders for measures, hiding columns, putting columns in folders where the measure is, all these things to kind of really clean it out. So now I've got okay, everything I have left is looking like it's a text string column. I mean, it's not text string, but it's a do not summarize column. And then there's a bunch of measures. And that's where I start from.
Yeah. I like where you're going with. I love this because I think a lot of times too, the reports or the data I'm using now, I'm not incredibly familiar with already the columns. I don't need to have the refined 6 columns that I need. So I actually have a script in the same way. I put all my columns into a display folder, into their own display folder. And I'm going through as I'm going through creating measures and utilizing this is important, this is not important. I'm elevating the columns out of it, just to help clean it up. Go, okay, these are clearly important columns. Let me put this in its own area. So I'm not looking at, I have to take 70 columns.
You do that in Power BI.
I'll load it in because at the time, I don't know what it's the discovery of going through, what do I need for Dax? What do I need for visuals? Now I see there's 75 statuses here or whatever the case is.
Yep.
So I'm basically downgrading everything and then slowly beginning to
pulling out what you actually need.
Because it's hard. It's difficult when you have data that you may be unfamiliar with. So
and there's no real good lineage type tool to get that. I mean, guess what? It depends on where you're at in your journey on data, right? If this is your first time loading data in, I'm more inclined to see users saying, "Well, I'm just going to take everything because I don't know what I'm going to need yet, so I'll just kind of keep it all."
Yeah.
Then if you say that at the beginning of your modeling experience, you should at the end of it you should say, "Okay, what did I use and what could I get rid of?" Because we just encountered a data set that had a 900 megabyte Power BI file after loading the data. We're like, whoa, there's a lot of data in here. But what we found out is because we were loading activities from things, if we took out only 2 activities that had no additional reporting value, so filtering the data, by taking out 2 activities, we're able to reduce the report by 60% size. So that's huge amount of savings, but only because we took a little bit more time and said, okay, what, not only the columns do I care about, but like what in those columns could I get rid of? Hey, look, this column and this is another one where I would say, oh, shoot, this is not going to be like for newbies, but I'm going to Dax Studio and I'm looking at Vertipack engine and I'm looking at the columns that I have in that model and that base thing. So a lot of times we'll bring that GUID or that key or that text field over into a fact table. You're like, you could leave it there, but is it causing a lot of extra repeating values? Is it causing a lot of distinct values? So those are other things I'm probably looking for. I'm also thinking about, dates and date times and trying to split them apart. So I'm doing maybe like dates, times minus the seconds, and maybe moving seconds out somewhere else so I can get some more repeating columns as opposed to a whole bunch of distinct things. There's things like that I'm doing to try and like keep the model size smaller because I don't want to just eat up space just for the heck of it.
Yeah. I'm going to say like in new data sets, right? A lot of the initial stuff resonates with what you guys are talking about, like the very exploratory, right? I want to pull in my data sets and I start to roughly try to conceptualize what I need the model to look like. And if you're not doing that, like go read up a lot about models, because one of the biggest traps for folks is just importing their source data and assuming that all these separate tables are going to relate to one another. And it
needs to be transformations.
You're going to find yourself in Dax hell pretty quick. So like kind of figure out what you need from this source data to like shaping perspective. And that'll pretty quickly like throw you into what are the gaps in the columns or data that I need in those tables, or how do I need to shape it, right? So then I can understand, okay, do I have the appropriate grain in my other tables? Do I need to combine this stuff?
Grains are a big problem.
There's a lot of just thinking through and making sure you're going to prep yourself for success. Once I have that, I start to think about, okay, my model is kind of structured, or I've shaped some things. Now I have visual needs, and usually that's the Dax, right? So what columns am I going to need for Dax calculations, for the visuals themselves? I'm not thinking about building the Dax calculations yet, but I do know the source data that's going to be preemptively like the stuff I'm going to pull in. And then I'll look at refining the data sets, right? Make sure my data is clean, look at data types, dial it all in, and then move towards development. But I think the one key thing that I do slightly separately from Tommy, but same thing, is I'm documenting this the whole time. So I have a separate Excel doc that has the source, Power BI table, the column, and the need. And that's my reference point, so that when I'm to the point where I'm like, I've got, and it's at different stages depending on the report, when I've got it dialed in, then I can look back and be like, okay, I've got more than I need in this. More often than not, I'm pulling in like the full table as opposed to just everything I need yet. And I'll analyze and I'll look at, for sure, these are the columns I need because I'm using them.
Yeah.
And then are there other ancillary columns that I probably am going to need in the future for just different variations of the report or a different view? And then everything else I strip out. So that data mapping document is pivotal for me, because it's not like I know or retain everything. I just take good notes.
Yeah.
And it's my reference point every time I need to go back, and it hangs with the document as it goes along.
I want to play off that slightly, because I really do love, there's the other element too of what do you do from an organization, or also the analytics side. So I always create 2 pages in the report, a sandbox and a dev that I call them, and I make them very large size, because I need to find, usually there's outliers. Usually there's probably example, this from the data science days, so to speak, of I have visuals that I really only use for my own, like for that exploration. I never put them in an actual report or for users. Histograms, box
scratch
plot.
padding.
Yeah, scratch padding.
Yeah. And like I have the report page that I'm developing, and then the scratch pad on the side for data gat. Like, yeah.
Why there's 79 types when there should be 5, or whatever the example is. And I think to your point, Seth, the documentation side of here, even if it's a Confluence, OneNote, wherever, just beginning, having your, send your Indiana Jones rope back to the source, it's so pivotal, especially with new data. Why does it
have to be Indiana Jones rope? Why couldn't it be like Wonder Woman's rope or like
Indiana Jones because he's the
lasso?
with the rock.
Woman's lasso.
No, it has nothing to do with the lasso.
Wonder Woman has the lasso of truth.
I'm thinking of Indiana Jones in the cave of.
Who else has got ropey things as superheroes?
Why the rocks everywhere he was, so he knew.
Yeah, isn't there like a batarang or something like that I can throw up on the top of a mountain? Like there's like a grappling hook that would be good.
It's not about going somewhere. This is about going.
Catwoman have something too.
No, that's true. That's a good point. It's not about going. It's not worried about where you're going. It's where you came from. And the batarang wouldn't really fit that. Yeah. But Indiana Jones does use the whip to go forward a lot of times. He's not going backwards with his whip.
What about Spider-Man?
Oh, he's got built-in stringer things. Yeah, the web. That's actually. But again, it's a lot about where he's going. It's not about historical. He's not leaving a trail.
Right. Yeah,
it should be more like Hansel and Gretel. Like there's food you're leaving behind yourself to go get it, as opposed to like ropes.
So yeah, I was.
All right, that was a good talk right there.
Yeah. So what?
High quality content here on explicit measures on this one. See, I think people are missing the. See, people who jump in the episode and listen to like the first 5 minutes, like these guys are boring. They missed the middle section at like minute 43, minute 45, where things get really good, and Michael has a huge ADHD moment, and we like really big rabbit trail, and it's like that's when it's fun. I enjoy that.
I'm bored.
Thanks for humoring me here for a hot second while I talk about ropes and spider webs. I don't care about this. No. Yeah, no, I do care about it. I do. I will say I do agree, Tommy, with your lineage steps. That makes a lot of sense. You got to know where things came from. I did want to go back to Seth's comment just briefly. You said you have an Excel document on the side that documents your model, and
I don't document the whole thing.
Just things that you care about.
Yeah,
just portions of it.
Yeah,
I've been doing some exploration, and this is maybe like another back to our previous segment about things you're doing, right? So things I'm doing right now is I'm actually exploring adding additional metadata to the model to support other analysis. So a couple things I have observed recently is there's now some new DAX measures. You go to dax.guide and you go look up info.perspectives, annotations, info.measures. There's a whole bunch of metadata that lives in the model that you can just go easily add. And so one thing that I'm not quite sure how to do it yet, but I'm kind of, as you mentioned that, Seth, around like, hey, I've got like 3 things I'm caring about. Like I'm noting these columns are important and maybe writing a little description around what's important there. That's what annotations are for.
Yeah. Okay. So let me be clear.
So why doesn't the Excel thing live inside the model and then use the model to chunk out?
It has a way to
import.
I'm just curious.
I love the fact that they're there. To me, that's documentation, right? So what I don't need to do right now anymore with those things is carry forward this Excel mapping document as the documentation.
Got it.
It's not its purpose though.
It's just literally a scratch pad for you. Got it.
It's the same thing as you like writing something down to firm it up in your head.
Sure.
So that's on my side, so that as I'm looking at things, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have to go back to source systems and start ripping through things.
Sure.
It's just that's my little my scratch pad that I use for documentation. But as we have new and better ways, of course I want to just regen, right? Like show me my lineage of all these things, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That's my documentation after I made my changes, as opposed to having to go manually add things back, because that's the bane of documentation, or why documentation sucks, because nobody ever goes back and redoes the manual stuff.
Yeah.
But unless you have I'm just going to click these buttons and then export the output. That's much easier.
Mike Kowalski has a way to export the current model of the Excel. You can write descriptions and then import that back in.
Mm-hmm. I can never forget his name. It's so close to Mike Wazowski.
I know that's
it's so good.
Right.
But I like your point there, Seth. And I'll say one more other note around that one. Something that changed my idea about what I want to document and where I want to put it is part of that is I'm looking at now Dax Query View. The Dax Query View changed a little bit of my mentality on the why I think that's so important. And let me give you some context here to why I think that is. The Dax Query View, you can just write evaluate info annotations. And it produces the table of all the annotations in the entire model. And you can even filter that list by taking that and saying, I'm only interested in things that are annotated on a measure or a column or whatever. So as I'm watching other people say, hey, these other, and all those info, my understanding is the info DAX functions are all they're doing is they're hitting the DMVs. It's the dynamic management views inside the model, and it's just giving you a list of what stuff that comes out. So this is, me, it's very extremely important here because now I can build DAX query views. And I think also John Kursky is very big on this as well. You can even write tests inside DAX query views because that DAX is then saved with the model, and you can potentially execute that in a later date somewhere else by reading that information. So I'm trying to, in my mind, formulate how can I better utilize DAX query view to do other things. And I think one of them is, I don't know if I can DAX query view my way into annotating all the columns because again, to your point, Tommy, about tabular editor, to me, as a more of a pro developer in Power BI models, I need DAX a tabular editor because I'm doing so much more in the model, and I'm trying to repeat the same thing over and over again. So annotating, putting things down, that becomes much easier when I can just hit a script and it just does 6 things for me for a column, and I can literally, you could even make like little UIs, like, hey, I'm going to click these columns, and for each column, I'm going to add a description. You can write out, you can build stuff that makes this easier for you to do. Anyways, all this to say is very interesting things, and I'm beginning to formulate some ideas around how can we better utilize the model to keep information that we care about for other applications to use.
And I love it. I think that's part of the development process, though.
I agree.
Right?
That's
like
right.
As you're getting
there. Yeah, that's probably
true. The last thing I would say on this question is don't just start building and then like towards a direction without doing any of this, because that's when you find yourself stuck, and then you're like, oh man, I got to refactor a whole bunch of things. I've got to, like, I don't have this data. Like that's a bad place to be.
I like that idea also, Seth, and I think a lot of times now, when you get good at doing modeling, or you've done it for a number of years and you can start visualizing what needs to happen, I think there are patterns you can observe just by looking at the tables and how they link to each other. So even before I get to desktop now, I'm even saying, let's just draw out in diagram form, what are the dimension tables? I know I'm going to have a date dimension. I know I'm going to have a fact table. So I'm going to make sure these two things talk to each other. And then I'll talk to the business and say, what other dimensions do we care about? Oh, we need to have customer. Oh, we need to have, product, or we need to have sales region. Okay.
The respective routines, once you have your data loaded, was the question.
I know, yes, I get it.
I agree. Conceptual models are huge.
It's huge for me.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I've got some, maybe the data is loaded and I'm just looking at the data, right? Maybe I'm looking at it, but I think I need to bump that. Even if the data is loaded, I'm probably bumping that data against some sort of conceptual model to make sure, like, look, I've got 3 fact tables. Can I even get all the dimensions, or will 4 of them fit into 3 and only 1 of them won't? Like, what does that look like? And does that change how you design the model? So I think if you're not doing a conceptual model of how the data should be stuck together, I think you just need to touch on that briefly, because that would, to me, I have found value in that, and I have saved myself hours of time by going down rabbit holes and reworking my data, because I'm like, shoot, I should have known this dimension wasn't going to attach. We got to go back to engineering and say, hey, you need to figure out a way to join this column into this table in the fact, because we don't have a join. And they're like, well, we don't know how to do it. I'm like, well, figure it out. And they take a week or 2 to go chew through stuff. And like, okay, we figured out a pattern that would work, but it's complex. I'm like, yeah, great. Do it in your end and not mine. I don't want the complex stuff. Just make the column resolve. Like, that's what I want. It's that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Any final points on this one, Tommy?
No, I think the biggest thing is the real quick part. The last point that he talked about was the gold models, thin reports. I think a lot of big points here too is, as you're building or as you're hiding or showing, is, can this be reused? And that's something I have to think more consciously about now, since I'm dealing with clients and I'm dealing with different projects and something I'm going to hand off. And it's like, I want this to be an engine or a model that's like, hey, you could build 3 reports off of here. Or, like, this can be reused. So the reusability side of this is something that, to both your points in terms of technical debt, just don't start building. Is this something that can run for other purposes, or can run not just for this one particular purpose?
Yep. Final question is a fast one. I know we're coming on the end of time. The end of time. This one actually is from somebody who added their name. So thank you, Chris Young, for asking this question. And there's a very straightforward answer to this one. So he says, I just finished listening to episode 310. Hey, what do you mean find a local user group? I've tried more than once without success, and I don't live in the middle of Alaska. I'm in Southeast Michigan, and everything I've found is seemingly defunct. What do you recommend? I'd even consider trying to get something started, but I don't really know how to do that.
Well, thank you, Pandemic, for screwing up our community.
I was going to say, go to dynamiccommunities.com. I think it's PBI user group.
Oh my gosh, what?
Oh no.
Shush. No.
Oh,
Tommy, stop trying to confuse people. So the simplest answer is community.fabric.microsoft.com, Power BI, user groups. Go there, scroll all the way to the bottom, start a new group. Even if there is one in your area, it's not going to matter. Somebody from Microsoft in the community area, maybe even is going to reach out and say, hey, if you're willing to start something up, we're here to support you, and they will help you build something up or plug you in with any existing group in the area, who probably will be more than happy to say, yeah, we'd still like to be part of it, but if you want to join, and if you want to help us get user groups back up and running in the local area, the things you got to find are locations, right? So hopefully there's a Microsoft office. Otherwise, there's some phone calling, right? Look around for local consulting firms that have spaces or open spaces that people would be willing to open up for a user group. But there's a lot of, I think, new emphasis on the community from the things from the folks we were talking to at the MVP Summit and areas there. So I highly recommend you go that route and start up a new group, and there'll be plenty of folks to help you out. If not, you come talk to us. You send in another thing, and we'll back channel this and make it work.
Yeah, I mean,
100% on that one.
You can always start. I mean, we haven't done a Chicago user group in a while, but we're going to be starting back up in June, and hopefully going local. So you can travel to Michigan. But Seth, I mean, it's perfect in terms of Microsoft now owns user groups. I was having a little fun, but Microsoft owns any user group that you want to join, and yeah, they have amazing support.
And to be clear, there's other, so Dynamic Communities is a community that is for Dynamics, but has also extended in. I think the community is still there. There is still a Power BI community there, albeit it's not very active. But I would also argue the Microsoft one has not been very active since the pandemic. It's kind of lost a lot of wind. There's not a lot of local meetups yet happening. So one thing I would recommend is go to Meetup and go look. So there's the communities for Power BI. But I think a lot of user groups are still very active on Meetup, and Meetup has been a very good medium for I'm just going to search the word Power BI, and a lot of events kind of just populate in your area or near you. And so I know a lot of teams and groups do that as well. I'd also, we have not been as good about it, but we want to get more, kind of back out of the pandemic and get back into doing things again. But we've been trying to keep our user group very online, and so trying to have monthly meetings around that as well. I'm also toying with the idea. I'm getting a little bit further down the path of doing the Midwest Mini Fabric Conference tour here a little bit, maybe hitting a couple cities and try and get some people involved to kind of kickstart some community things. Microsoft is doing things in the community. So their Las Vegas Fabric Conference was a lot around community, a lot around technical things. So I think they're really trying to put an initiative around. When I was there, they were talking about the community is awesome. It's really good. We want to encourage you to get together. We want to encourage you to talk about the tool. So I think Microsoft is taking a concerted effort to continue to kind of invest back into community, and not hey, we're going to do community and Microsoft's going to do a sales pitch. It's more like Fabric Conference in Las Vegas, where it was, here's a whole bunch of technical sessions. Here's a handful of MVPs that are speaking and talking about our tool and giving you best practices. So stay tuned. I believe there's more things coming down that route as well. It may not be in your little region, but I'm hoping that this is going to kind of ignite another wind of user groups and getting things going. My opinion, communities or user groups that were very large, 1,000 members plus, seem to keep going. They figured out how to keep themselves alive because they like that community. Smaller groups, I think, had a harder time finding sponsorships, finding locations, and just kind of, it got a lot of work and it just kind of started slowly dying out. So I think we'll see maybe another wave of community kind of stuff ramp up. It kind of comes in waves. I think it ramps up and then it kind of ramps down, then ramps up and kind of ramps down. So we may be in a little bit of a trough getting back into
But
it.
don't be discouraged either. I mean, I think the first user group I started, we had 7 members in the beginning coming in, and it's kind of like,
And
cool.
3 of them were your family, Tommy. Your mom was there, and your brother was there, and
She brought the food.
Still counts.
she brought the food. Ma, where's the
Ma,
lasagna?
yeah,
Ma.
I want to get some lasagna out of.
That's how it grew so fast. The food was.
Tommy was giving out lasagnas.
No, but I think there's a big point. Like, and we started meeting monthly. By the end, when I moved to Chicago, there were like every user group in person, which almost sounds unheard. We had about 35, 40 people coming. Obviously, moving to Chicago, you already start with a larger number. But if you want to really have a local user group, and that's something that you find that you're lacking or missing, or you think that there's a need for it,
Yep.
even if you start small, even if it's you and another person, you're speaking to one person. I mean, sometimes there's a lot of creativity there too. You find people who want to help out, even if it's a smaller group. Those are obviously people who are also passionate, who can help out with the promotion, and you can build from there. There's nothing cooler than building something from scratch. So.
And you never know where it'll go, because Mike and I met at the local user group.
Seth ruined my entire career path, so now I'm a business owner all on my own, and like all this.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Do you want to rewind to where you were?
No, thanks. I'm being very facetious with that comment. It was a great move for me. I found a great friend. Seth and I have been friends for a long time now, and we talk a lot about essentially a lot around data things, but also family things and other things as well. So you find other very like-minded people that are fun as well. So I definitely would encourage it. If you're even remotely passionate about it, just start something, and then where to put what you're doing. Go get it started on the Microsoft community site, and go start it on a meetup, potentially. Go figure out how to do those things and try and get those going that way. That way people are consuming and regularly using those things to find about Power BI events. So that would be what I would recommend. Also, if you want to partner with us, we help out with a lot of user groups anyways. So we try and broadcast. If you have the ability of doing a live broadcast from your user group, we'll do it right here on the Tips channel and help, hopefully increase your expertise and your size of the user group. We'll be more than happy to help broadcast it if that helps get your team out there, your group out there. Anyways, with that, we want to say thank you so much for your time listening to the episode today. I know this is a long time, an hour out of your day. Hopefully you're getting some other productive stuff done, such as running or exercising. Contrary to what we do, we just sit in chairs all day. So we hope we've encouraged you to exercise a little bit and get a little fun around some data things. Also, we just want to say, if you like this episode, if you found some value from it, maybe even got a laugh or two, we would really appreciate it if you would share it with somebody else. We think this really helps grow our community, and we want to continue to grow it to other people as well who may have never heard of the podcast. So please share it with somebody else. We appreciate that. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
Well, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, an idea, or a topic like we did today that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast, leave your name and a great question. Finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of powerbi.tips social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.